EVO.
Some nights, darkness is just the slow dimming of the world. The sun slips under the horizon, the fields cool, and everything that needs to sleep does so without incident. Shadows are simply what happens when the light goes away. And then there are nights when darkness feels like it's watching. On the rural back roads between Kelly and Hopkinsville, Kentucky, the August heat of 1955 didn't let go easily. It clung to the farmhouses and hung in the air like a fever. Screens rattled in their frames. Dogs dozed in hard-packed dirt. The only real drama most nights was the drunken drawl of a country song leaking from a neighbor's radio. Until the night the sky lit up and something appeared to fall out of it. What followed has been told so many ways that the story barely belongs to the people who lived it anymore. There were little men, there were guns, there were wide eyes, white knuckles, 40-odd rounds of ammunition, and a house that, according to everyone inside it, was under siege for hours by something that wasn't human. In a few minutes from now, we're going to reach the moment when a man looked out a farmhouse window and saw a face pressed against the glass that would never entirely leave him. But for now, whether that was a visitor from another world or something his own mind dragged out of the darkness is the question that has been scratching at the walls of this story ever since. Because sometimes the real monster isn't what's outside the house. It's what the human brain does when the night refuses to behave. Welcome back to The Devil Within. Tonight we're going into one of the strangest nights in American folklore. A story that's been used to sell roadside statues and UFO t-shirts, but started as something much smaller and much more fragile. A family on a farm, a hot summer night, a sky that did something it shouldn't have, and a house full of people who suddenly realized that the darkness outside no longer felt empty. This isn't really a story about goblins, so to speak. It's a story about perception, fear, and the way one long night turned into an enduring legend because nobody could stand the idea that what they experienced might not make sense. This is Things That Go Bump in the Night, the story of the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblins. Edgar Allan Poe spent a lot of time writing about the moment when reality stops being reliable. Hearts beating under floorboards that only one person can hear, ravens that might be birds, or they might be the personification of grief, shadows darkening doorways that may not really be there at all. He understood something that we rarely admit openly. The line between what's out there and what's inside our heads is much thinner than we want it to be. And that is exactly where the Kelly Hopkinsville story lives. So stay with me, because before long we're going to land on the single moment when everyone in that farmhouse became convinced at the same time that something was walking toward their windows with its hands raised. In that instant, their anchor moment is where the world breaks for them. And what they decided to believe in that break is where the real horror lives. Chapter 1, The Farm and the Sky. The Sutton farm wasn't special. If you drove past it in the summer of 1955, you might have noticed the scattering of outbuildings, the scratched-up chicken yard, the sagging front porch. You might have seen children moving in and out of the house, bare feet and loud voices. You might have glimpsed a washing line strung with worn clothes and really thought nothing of it. Most people didn't even know whether to call it Kelly or Hopkinsville. The farm sat in that in-between place where the addresses kind of blur, close enough to both towns to belong to neither one entirely. It was a working place. There was a cramped house, a family trying to make a life in post-war America that looked shiny in magazines, but still felt stubbornly hard in the rural pockets where prosperity never fully arrived. Inside that house on August 21st, there were members of the Sutton family and their guests. Lucky Sutton, his wife, his mother, kids running underfoot, and a friend named Billy Ray Taylor who was visiting from out of town. Their lives were not glamorous. They were people used to work and to long evenings, to laughter, the occasional argument, and to the comfort of routine. The world around them was changing, though. Newspapers started carrying stories about flying saucers. The Cold War smoldered in the background. People were learning a new vocabulary of threat. Radar, jets, atomic tests, objects that appeared on screens where nothing should be. The idea that the sky might suddenly become a source of menace had started to creep in around the edges of the American imagination. But inside the Sutton kitchen, that night was just another night. Heat, shared food, the clink of dishes, the lazy drift of conversation, the feel of sweat at the base of the neck that never quite dried. Sometime around 7 p.m., Billy Ray went outside to the well pump to draw water. The light was beginning to soften. The fields around him hummed with insects. He wasn't thinking about anything extraordinary. He was thinking about, being thirsty. But then he saw it. A bright, silvery object streaked across the sky and appeared to drop into a nearby gully, leaving behind a trail of color that didn't look like any ordinary meteor he'd ever heard described. This moved with purpose. It seemed controlled. It made no sound he could identify, but he felt something in his chest vibrate as it passed. He stood there, frozen, one hand on the pump handle, watching the sky close over the place where it had disappeared. Billy Ray ran back inside and told them what he'd seen. Eyes rolled, someone laughed. The family knew him well enough to know he could lean into a story, but he insisted. His voice climbed. He swore there had been something solid, something with a kind of shape that you could almost feel. Now this is where Edgar Allan Poe would lean forward. In so many of his stories, a single reported sensation, a sound, a glimpse, a flicker, it becomes the small crack that eventually breaks the whole wall down. Not because the event itself is enormous, but because of what the human mind does with it. Around the Sutton table, the first seed was planted. Something might be out there. But it would take an hour or so before the night decided to follow through. Chapter 2. The Things in the Yard. The house settled into its usual rhythms again. People tried to shrug off Billy Ray's insistence. Maybe it was a shooting star. Maybe it was a plane. Maybe you saw, the reflection of something, swamp gas. It's hard to persuade a room full of people to move from comfort to fear without evidence. The mind resists it. The body doesn't really want the adrenaline. On an ordinary night, the story would have become a joke. A tale about the wild thing that Billy swore he saw while everyone else kept eating supper. The dogs began to bark first, and not the irritated staccato that says, hey, a rabbit's too close to the fence, man. No, a deeper, more panicked sound. The kind of barking that pulls everyone's attention like a thread. It went on longer than it should have, persistent and ragged. Lucky and Billy Ray stepped out onto the porch to see what was wrong. The yard, under the thick Kentucky dark, looked thicker somehow. Shadows pooled under the trees, the fields beyond the fence no longer felt so open, and the dogs, usually brave in their own limited way, had backed toward the house, low to the ground, growls rolling out in tremors. Then there was movement near the edge of the property. Not fast, not dramatic, just wrong. Two small shapes slowly emerged from the tree line, about 3 or 4 feet tall, with rounded heads, and if the witnesses are to be believed, large shining eyes that seemed to catch any scrap of light and throw it back. And they weren't running, they weren't charging, they weren't walking. The figures moved with a strange combination of stiffness and grace. Arms extended slightly, hands raised, as if either in surrender or reaching for something that neither man could see. In later retellings, these would become the Goblins. Wide-set eyes, long arms, heads nearly bald. In some versions, their legs were barely functional, their bodies almost floating. In others, they had talons, spike-like ears, a metallic sheen to their skin. Storytelling is a living thing, and details swell over time. But in that first moment, what Lucky and Billy Ray experienced was simpler than any of that. They saw something humanoid moving toward them that didn't match any animal that they knew or heard of. And man, the mind hates that. In one of Edgar Allan Poe's stories, a man stares at a shape in the distance and can't decide whether he's seeing a person or a tree. The horror comes not from what the figure is, but from the prolonged uncertainty about its true nature. And that uncertainty sparks imagination. And imagination, once activated, doesn't go quietly back to sleep. Billy Ray and Lucky backed into the house and grabbed their guns. And rational thought didn't have a chance to complete its paperwork. This was protection mode. There are small things with big eyes walking toward the house. We protect the house. Inside, the others could feel the mood completely change. Jokes died on the lips. The air itself seemed denser. Children stopped moving. The older generation, who had seen enough hard things in life to know what panic looks like when it walks into a room, watched the men with increasing unease. Now, they didn't know it yet, but they were all about to step into a night they would never entirely step out of again. Because if the dark holds something with a face, you can never completely return to the belief that it's empty. Chapter 3. The Face at the Window. They did what people do when they're afraid and you live in the country. Turn off the lights, load the guns, position yourselves at the windows. The house itself became a kind of body, with eyes at every side, waiting to see where the threat would emerge. Children were told to stay low and to stay back. The women pulled them into the corners, every muscle strung tight. Someone whispered a prayer. In the half-light, the boundary between the inside and the outside felt like a membrane that could dissolve at any moment. And for a while, nothing moved. Just the wind, the distant insects, the erratic barking of a dog that could no longer decide whether staying or running was safer. And then Billy Ray saw it. At the edge of the yard again, one of the small figures, now closer, standing under a low branch. The light from the house caught its surface in a way that made it appear shiny and almost metallic. Its eyes, wide and reflective, looked too large for its head. Its arms dangled in that same strange way, hands turned slightly upward. And he fired. The sound of the shot split the night and ignited every nerve in the house. The figure appeared to flip backward, not so much falling as rolling out of sight. No scream, no blood, just gone. For a moment, they allowed themselves to believe that whatever it was had been hurt. That cause and effect still meant something, that a threat could be answered with force, and that threat was therefore removed. But that moment didn't last, because something scratched at the roof. A skittering sound like hands or claws moving across the shingles. They heard whatever it was travel from one side of the house to the other, quick and insistent. Then another figure appeared in the doorway, framed by darkness, those same wide eyes catching the faint light like coins at the bottom of a well. And Lucky fired again. Billy Ray followed. The reports from the firearms echoed across the fields, and this is where we hit that anchor moment, the precise instant when all of this hardens into their memories. Someone screamed from inside the house. Because when one of the women turned toward a side window, she saw a small face pressed directly against the glass. Peering in, its hands braced on either side of its head, no eyelids blinking away the glare, no normal human flinch at being caught, just those shining eyes in the unnatural stillness. She would later say that the look on the face wasn't anger, it was curiosity, and that might be the most unsettling detail of all. The shot that blew out the window sent glass in all directions. Children ducked, Adults shouted over one another, and for a wild, cascading instant, no one could tell where the night ended and the house began. It felt as though the darkness had finally decided to come in. This is the point of no return. From here on, every sound outside becomes a footstep. Every shadow becomes a figure. Every creak in the wood becomes a hand testing the walls. Now, Poe knew that once the mind decides a house is haunted, the house is freaking haunted. Every ordinary noise becomes part of the new script. Every movement is a threat. Reality and interpretation merge until they are indistinguishable. The Sutton farmhouse had become exactly that kind of house. They would spend the next hours firing at shapes on the roof, at figures glimpsed near the eaves, at glints of light that might have been eyes or might have been nothing at all. Bullets tore into door frames, roofs, the surrounding trees. It felt to them like a siege. It felt very specifically like they were under attack by something that couldn't be explained, couldn't be reasoned with, and did not respond to gunfire the way a living creature should. The devil within the story, they need to explain the terror that fills blanks with monsters, was now fully awake. And it was just getting started. By the time they finally fled the house and made it to the sheriff's office in Hopkinsville, they were pale, shaking, and furious that no one they told believed fast enough. Sheriff Russell Greenwell listened anyway. He got in his car, he gathered a convoy of officers, some armed with weapons, some armed with nothing but skepticism, and drove out into the country night toward the Sutton farm. They would walk through that bullet-riddled house. They would search the yard, the fields, the roofs, and they would find no bodies, no blood, no tracks that made sense. But they would find something that made a few of those officers, just for a moment, feel a chill at the back of their necks that they didn't want to talk about afterward. The kind of chill that says, either something was here, or fear itself can leave footprints. Now, if we froze the story right here, it would be tempting to laugh it off as a case of rural hysteria. A hot night, a bright meteor, a house full of people with guns, and an appetite for drama. But that would be too easy. What happened on that farm is less about whether there were goblins in the yard and more about the way the human mind reacts when unknown darkness stops feeling like an absence and starts feeling like an active presence. Once that change happens, nothing outside has to move. The terror is already inside. If you enjoyed part 1, if you can see that face at the window, make sure you're following The Devil Within wherever you're listening right now. Rate, review, and share the show with someone who loves strange human stories. And when you're ready, join us for part 2, where we walk that farm again in the daylight and discover that the real monster might not have been out there at all. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to check the show notes for great deals from the wonderful sponsors that still support long-form storytelling. And until next time, stay safe out there. The Devil Within is an EVO production, recorded live at Bel Air Studios in Los Angeles, California. For The Devil Within, I'm your writer and host, Brandon Morgan.